Today is Monday. We have gone through another weekend, and what happens in the weekend is more boss testing in the PTR. The difference this time around is that we haven't gotten mythic raid testing anymore. Instead, we have gotten heroic testing. We have gotten testing for Nimue and for Larodar. These were the two testable bosses in the PTR this weekend. It's a nice combo of bosses, since both bosses are primarily single target, so they are the type of damage you will be seeing the most throughout this new raid, and also the fact that even though it's heroic, we can still see the changes. We have gotten a couple more rounds of balance tuning in this last week. Here are the two sets of changes. We have gotten some interesting ones. For example, we can now see the effects of the changes to the rogues, the change of the tier to Holy Paladin, the big major nerf to the tier set of Elemental Shaman, and then a new set of changes with buffs to Discipline, as well as the nerfs to Havoc and the nerf to Outlaw Rogue. So now we get to see the effects of these changes in this last set of testing. We have now taken in here every single log available from this weekend, from October the 20th on Friday all the way up to Sunday, where the boss testing was, deep enough. It was close to a kill, or if not, a straight up kill of each of the bosses from the heroic testing, to see exactly the results of many of the specs that tried these bosses. The first thing that you will notice when checking these results is that from the first log to the second one, to the third one, to the fourth one, you will find some similarities, number one being Enhancement Shaman. We can see here that throughout the majority of the testing on different bosses, from a Nimue wipe to a Larodar kill to another Larodar very close wipe to another Nimue pull, Enhancement has been doing very well. This is not a surprise, if we have to be honest. If we check at the PTR logs that we have gotten from Mythic, overall we left on the 13th of October, and this was the result of Enhancement. So Enhancement was already amongst the better performers. The other ones were Outlaw and Havoc, together with Elemental and Fury. What is interesting is that all of these three specs have just been nerfed. So we can also try to find out the impact of these nerfs on each of these specs. We have talked about the least of the nerfs was going to be to Havoc, because the nerf to the Immolation Aura of Havoc was going to be a barely 2% single target nerf. So on a pure single target fight, this Havoc is still doing quite well. This Havoc Demon Hunter is still doing quite well. Here we go, more Havoc Demon Hunters still doing just fine. Then we can move forward. There is another Havoc doing quite well on Nimue. We move over to a Nimue kill, and Havoc is still doing just fine. Back to a Larodar kill, Havoc is topping the meters. Back to another Larodar kill, Havoc is topping the meters again. So throughout all of this testing, yes, Havoc has been nerfed, but as mentioned, a measly 2% nerf doesn't seem to have damaged too much the performance of Havoc Demon Hunter. The other spec being nerfed was Outlaw. Now this is interesting because throughout much of this testing, as we are scrolling through all of these results, Outlaw is not actually played that much. We do have a handful of Outlaw logs here and there, but actually there seem to be more assassination logs, even more subtlety logs than Outlaw players. As we have scrolled through all of the logs available for very deep attempts or straight up kills, there's only one Outlaw actually available, and he wasn't doing particularly well. So we cannot actually see the impact of the 6% damage nerf to Outlaw, mostly because we haven't actually gotten to see them in game. We could speculate, all of the rogues have jumped ship. They just went to try assassination and subtlety in anticipation of this nerf. They're like, well, Outlaw is dead now, so I might as well start playing assassination. It's not that in the last two rounds of tuning, assassination was touched particularly. As I said, there was one pretty decent change, but those were for AoE, really, the poison bomb change, and then the next round of tuning, assassination and subtlety received no changes. So the majority of these logs now playing with non-Outlaw rogues are not allowing us to see the big picture of the state of Outlaw. The other spec that did receive a significant nerf was Elemental. We mentioned the big nerf to the set bonus. These are the elemental results right now on both Nimue and Larodar logs. There is elemental still doing reasonably well in the logs. Now, the nerf was going to be hurting more in AoE, in cleave, more so than single target, even though it was still a nerf in single target. As you can see nowadays, previously this used to be a much higher damage percentage done by Lava Burst, more so than Elemental Blast. Now it has been changed by quite a bit. The nerf definitely has impacted Elemental. It will no longer have this type of presence in the results compared to prior to the nerf. As we said, the bigger problem of Elemental is the rest. Elemental needed such a strong tier set because their base damage, their base power was quite low. Not to mention other weaknesses like being the only one without a raid buff, still being a rather squishy spec, etc, etc. So those are still the other main problems of the spec. Throughout all of this testing, we have also seen a few specs that we have not mentioned too much before. For example, Affliction. We do see some pretty good results of Affliction Warlocks, more so than Demo. Throughout this entire testing was showing up a few times, but overall not that much, and the results were also not splendid compared to Affliction. In general, Affliction was slightly better performing than Demo. And it's also interesting due to the fact that it's not that Demo or Affliction have been significantly changed in this two last rounds of tuning. Warlock received no changes from the tuning of 5 days ago, and then from the tuning of 3 days ago, Warlock still received no changes. So these are still essentially the same versions of Warlock we have seen in this type of tuning. Nothing really has changed, and yet we have gotten more presence now of Affliction compared to back then, compared to the 13th of October, where now we do have a larger presence and a better performance as well of Affliction Warlocks. Another thing we can notice from these logs are the performances of both Fire and Arcane. When it comes to mages, it seems like Frost has been played less, at least looking from this last week's of result. You have Fire Mage here doing quite well, followed by another Fire Mage. Then you have Arcane and Fire still being played, another Fire Mage. You do have a Frost Mage, but not doing nearly as well. Back to a Fire Mage doing quite well, Arcane Mage doing quite well, another Arcane Mage doing quite well, you have another Arcane Mage doing quite well, and we finish with more Arcane. So compared once more to the last results of the last 10 days ago, basically, where Arcane was not doing well at all, and it was only Fire Mage that was performing very well. Now Arcane is doing significantly better. Once more, if we go back to the last 2 rounds of tuning, Mage has not received any changes. No matter the spec, they have remained unchanged. So this is just out of the original performance of the spec of Arcane Mage in this case, now performing much better, similar to the performance that Fire Mage already has in the PTR. We do, however, have still another bunch of well-performing specs to check on. We have Beast Mastery, we have Shadow, we have Ret, we have Feral, we also have Fury, for example. So going through these results, we do see, for example, specs like Fury still doing well as Beast Mastery continuing to do quite well. Here is Shadow Priest, here is Ret, and here is BM as well. This is another Shadow Priest, another BM. You also have another BM over here. We keep going. There is a Red Paladin. There is a couple of Red Paladins with a BM Hunter as well as a Shadow Priest. You have another BM Hunter with a Fury Warrior. BM Hunter is still doing quite well. There is also Fury. Feral. Finally, we see our first Feral performing very well still. You also have BM Hunter doing well. More Feral, more Fury, more Shadow Priest with more Fury and more Feral as well as more Feral again. The specs are continuing to do well compared to the last round of tuning. Perhaps the only small difference was the change here. Arms Warrior being tried a little bit more compared to the last time we looked at the results in the PTR in Mythic. Now in Heroic you have seen a few more of them. But in terms of the well-performing ones, basically in this bump, we can even add Balance and Devastation because we have seen quite a few of them actually performing well. This is a Devastation. There is a Devastation doing well here. There is a Balance Druid doing well here. More Double Balance doing well. Now there is a Devastation doing well. We keep going. There is another Devastation doing well. There is more Devastation, more Balance doing well. Another Balance doing well. Another Devastation doing well. So throughout these results, Balance and Devastation have continued also to do well. Not the best, not, you know, close to the top like these results as we have seen. They're still doing, you know, decent overall. Again, none of these specs have received any major changes in the last set of tuning. Neither Devastation or Balance have received any changes, so it's expected for them to continue these nice results. Same can be said for Unholy and Augmentation, that we have also seen doing well at times. This is Augmentation, this is more Augmentation, more Augmentation, more Augmentation, more Augmentation, and now I'm getting to sound like a broken record, but Augmentation has been doing all right whenever it was being played, and Unholy also, the few times you can find it, it's doing reasonably well, we can say, specifically in pure single target fights, or almost pure single target fights. So most of the positives, more or less up to here, we can confirm. We can confirm that even in heroic testing, even a week after, even after a couple of rounds of tuning, they have more or less remained on a similar note. The only possible question mark really is Outlaw. After the 6% nerf, we haven't actually seen enough of Outlaw in the PTR to gauge how well it's doing now, as well as Elemental not being nearly as strong as before because of the nerf to the tier set, but the other ones have been more or less performing the same. Now it's time to go at the bottom. It's time to look at this part of the results. Obviously, it's also hard because if they are doing badly, it's less likely for them to be played. We have mentioned a couple of these already. We have mentioned Affliction doing better, we have mentioned Arcane doing better, and we've also mentioned Assassination and Subtlety being played more than Outlaw. However, we are now playing a game. We're now playing Find the Marksmanship Hunter. Tell me, how many Marksmanship Hunters did you actually see? The answer is 0, because there are no Marksmanship Hunters in the PTR testing these bosses. So we don't really have any type of judgment to give to Marksmanship. Much like in this testing in Mythic, there was no Marksmanship Hunter. Nobody is playing Marksmanship right now. So Marksmanship at the moment is Schrodinger's spec. We actually don't know if it's alive or dead at any time. Not really much to say about Marksmanship. There are a few other specs not being played also that much. For example, if you were scrolling down these results looking for a green bar to find Marksmanship, you might have also realized you actually can't find the green bar showing Survival Hunter. That is also something that has been missing from this testing. Altogether, pretty much, there is no really any Survival Hunter either. We have seen more Survival Hunters, to be fair. We have seen more of them in Mythic Plus. There is a reasonable presence of survival in Mythic Plus logs, but not really in the raid. So also, we can't really say that much about the performance of survival right now in the raid due to not really being played that much. The few other specs we haven't mentioned in the results are Frost Decay, Windwalker, we also haven't mentioned Destruction. So going through the logs, once more these being underplayed specs, for example, it will be harder to find them. For example, Frost Decay is almost completely deserted. We do have, I believe, a handful of Windwalker Monk logs throughout these results, but it's gonna be quite hard to find any as we keep scrolling down. There is still no Frost. As we keep going, we still look for them. We find one of them here, a Windwalker Monk. Expectedly on a 4% log, we see a Windwalker Monk not doing that well in single target. Not really too much of a surprise, honestly, that Windwalker is not doing too well, but that is about all we can find about these two specs, together with the last one being Frost Decay, once more on a single target log, not doing too well. So these are the only basically two logs across these last weekends of pulls of two heroic bosses that went, you know, deep enough to be either kills or very close to a kill pull. Frost and Windwalker have also not been played a lot. Only one log across a weekend of testing of good pulls, so it's also hard to gauge them. Yes, in the only log we see, they are doing badly, but again, you can't judge too much from just one log, although it would be continuing the trend that neither of these two specs are particularly strong in single target right now. So when going through all of these results, we do have some confirmation of results, as well as some new things perhaps worth looking into or worth keeping track of as we keep going deeper into the testing, like for example the buff given basically to caustic spatter to assassination, now doing a much more significant part of your damage as assassination. So going through this, you see some specs continuing to do as well as before, but then you also see some things that are perhaps changing, specs that are being played more compared to what we saw here. We saw Arcane being played more, Affliction, Assassination, Subtlety are being played more. We also have seen a handful more of Arms Warriors being played, fewer Demonology in response to more Affliction Warlocks, fewer Fire Mages in response to more Arcane Mages, pending the results of the nerfs to Outlaw as well as the nerfs to Elemental Shaman. These are so far the results in this latest weekend of testing, which was done in Heroic rather than in Mythic. Of course, it's Heroic, so it's easier, mechanics are not nearly as bad, plus the size of the group can change wildly. For example, this group has a lot more players than this group, for example. There are things that might change, but in terms of damage, in terms of the results of the specs in the PTR, that's what we have noted in this last round of testing in this weekend. So with this update out of the way as far as the results of the DPS specs on the PTR, we are now leaving each other on this Monday, the start of a new week. We are starting the goodbyes as usual by thanking all of the Patreon supporters for the contribution and help to the growth of the channel, which, as usual, can still be given completely for free. You can like and comment down below, as well as subscribe to the channel itself, which would still be a nice way to show your support. So, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching, see you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, yeah, I am fine with the duration of this video. As usual, if it was a couple minutes shorter, it would have been better, but